Gemara says in Maseches Megillah that Purim shechalios b'Shabbos, if Purim would fall out on Shabbos, shoylim v'dorshim b'nyono shel yoyim. Even though you don't read the Megillah, the Chazal made a takana, you shouldn't read the Megillah because you might come to carry it, but you have drashas on the Yom of Purim. The Ritva brings a Tosfos. We don't have the Tosfos. The Tosfos says that you learn the halachas of Megillah, the halachas of reading the Megillah. So even though you don't actually read the Megillah on Shabbos, you learn the halachas of reading the Megillah. So the Ritva asks a kasha, that the halacha is that when Purim falls out on Shabbos, you read the Megillah before Shabbos. So for example, in Yerushalayim, where Shushan Purim is observed, and it can fall out on Shabbos, when that happens, you read the Megillah on Friday. So what's the point of learning the halachas of reading the Megillah on Shabbos? You already read the Megillah the day before. So the Ritva says, the Pshat in the Gemara, that when Purim falls out on Shabbos, you are doiresh, b'nyono shel yoyim, you discuss the topics of the day. It means you darshan Megillah Esther, the story of Purim, and so on and so forth. But the halachas of reading the Megillah are now irrelevant, because you've already read the Megillah the day before. That's what the Ritva says. And the Brisker Rav answered this Tosfos, and he explained the following: that if you want to understand the essence of a Yom Tov, you have to investigate the halachas of the Yom Tov. The true understanding of a Yom Tov only comes from an analysis of the halachas of the Yom Tov. Because you can talk about the stories, you can talk about the Agadata, but to really understand the content, the inner depth of a Yom Tov, you have to investigate the halachas. And therefore, when Purim falls out on Shabbos, it's true that you've already read the Megillah the day before. But you want to understand what Purim is all about. You want to understand what Purim is all about, you have to learn the halachas of Purim. So therefore, even though we read the Megillah yesterday, today we learn the halachas of reading the Megillah, not because we want to know what to do, we've done it already, but because that is the key, that is the way to understand what the story of Purim is all about. So today I'd like to learn a little bit halacha, the first Mishnah Maseches Megillah, and we'll analyze the halachas, and perhaps we'll come up with some ideas that relate to an understanding of the inner meaning of Purim. Right? The Mishnah says that the Megillah could be read on the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th of Adar. Not earlier or not later. It's first Mishnah Maseches Megillah. So the Mishnah goes on to explain that open cities, unwalled cities, observe Purim on the 14th, as we do, 14th of Adar. Walled cities, cities that have walls from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, they observe Purim the next day, on the 15th. The only city that comes to mind is Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was a city that had a wall from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, so they observe Purim on the 15th. Now the question is the 11th, 12th, and 13th. So the Gemara says this applies to people who live in small villages. And these villagers used to go into the big city on the market days, the Mondays or Thursdays, and therefore the Rabbanan made a special leniency that they can hear the Megillah when they go into the big city on the Monday or Thursday before Purim. Why did they make this leniency? So Rashi says, because the people who lived in the villages didn't have anyone that could read the Megillah for them. So they had to hear it in the city. So since anyway they're coming in Monday and Thursday, why should they have to make a special trip? So the Chazal said that if Purim is not on a Monday or Thursday, you can read the Megillah on the Monday or Thursday before Purim. So for example, let's say Purim falls out on a Sunday. So the Thursday before is Yud Aleph. This is the 11th of Adar. Or let's say Purim falls out on a Friday. So the day before is Yud Gimel. Or if Purim comes out on a Wednesday, so the Monday before is Yud Beis. So this is how you have villagers reading the Megillah on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Needless to say, if Purim falls out on a Monday or Thursday, then they read it on the 14th along with everybody else, because that's when they're in the city. So we really have three groups. We have the villagers, who sometimes have a leniency. They can read the Megillah on the Monday or Thursday before Purim, which could be as early as the 11th. It could be the 12th or the 13th. We have the people that live in the open cities who read the Megillah on the 14th. And we have the people in the walled cities from Tanna Yeshua we don't read on the 15th. The Gemara in Maseches Yevamos asks a question on this Mishnah. There's a halacha in the Torah, lo sizgaidu, which literally means you're not allowed to cut yourself in the way that the idolaters did as a sign of mourning. But the Gemara takes this pasuk and understands it in a second sense. The lo sasu agudas agudas. You cannot make factions in Klal Yisrael. The Torah cannot be observed in different ways by different groups. Lo sasu agudas agudas. Don't make factions. There's one Torah, everyone has to observe the Torah the same way. So the Gemara asks the question on this Mishnah, that how do you have a situation where different people are reading at different times? Now the Rishonim understand that the main concern of the Gemara is that why is it that in the open cities they're reading a Daled, and on the walled cities they read on Tezvav, on the 15th. The villagers will deal with in a moment. But the Gemara is really concerned about this distinction between the walled cities and the open cities. Why are there 2 days? There should be a violation of Leisus Gaidu. Now the Gemara never explicitly answers this question. But the Gemara brings a machlokas Abaye and Rava, and the Rishonim understand that the Gemara's question is answered by making reference to this machlokas. Abaye says there's no problem of Leisus Gaidu if you have Shnei Batei Dinim B'Shnei Ayaros. If you have 2 separate cities, and each city has its own bezdin, so it's 2 Batei Din in 2 different cities, there's no problem with Leisus Gaidu. There's only problem with Leisus Gaidu if you have Shnei Batei Dinim B'Yerachas. If you have 2 courts in one city, and one court rules X, and the other court rules not X, that's the problem with Leisus Gaidu. Because in the one city, you have 2 different practices. But if it's 2 different cities, there's no problem. Rava is even more lenient. Rava says that even within one city, there's no problem if it's Shnei Batei Dinim. The only problem with Leisus Gaidu is if you have one bezdin in the city, and that bezdin itself is divided. Plag Moira and K'divi Beisilo, Uplag Moira and K'divi Beishamai. Half the court rules one way, half the court rules another way. That's where you have a problem. But if it's 2 separate courts, even within one city, there's no problem. But everyone agrees that if it's 2 separate cities, there's no problem with Lori Sizgaidu. Everyone agrees. Even Abaye says that. Rav is more lenient. Even within one city, if it's 2 separate Batei Din, there's no problem. But in 2 different cities, there's certainly no problem. So the Rishonim explain, therefore the Gemara's question, even though the Gemara doesn't explicitly answer it, the Gemara's question is answered. If you're bothered, how is it that the open cities read on the 14th and the walled cities on the 15th? Those are 2 separate cities. 2 separate cities, there's no problem with Loi Sizgaidu. So the Gemara's question is answered. But the Rishonim ask the question that why isn't the Gemara puzzled by the villagers? The villagers read on the Monday and Thursday before Purim in the big city. Right? They have nobody to read for them in the village. They go into the big city. In the big city, they read sometimes on the 11th, 12th, or 13th. And the local citizens of the big city read on the 14th. Here you have a situation of 2 different practices in one city. So why isn't the Gemara concerned about that? So the Ritva brings from a Taisvus an answer to this question. That the Ritva says that there's only a problem of Leisus Gaidu where there's a machlokas, where there's a potential for conflict. Meaning, because each group says that my practice is the right way, and anyone who does the opposite is wrong. So that's a volatile situation. Right? If I believe what I'm doing is right, what you're doing is wrong. You believe what you're doing is right, what I'm doing is wrong. So that's the potential for machlokas. So that's where there's Leisus Gaidu. But if I do one thing and you do something else, but I acknowledge that what you're doing is right for you, and you acknowledge what I'm doing is right for me, there's no potential for conflict, if there's no Leisus Gaidu. So here when it comes to the city people and the villagers, there's no potential for machlokas, because the city people understand we live here. So there's no point in our reading it early, on the Monday and Thursday before Purim. We're here anyway, so we might as well do it on the proper day. The villagers, they are coming in specially, so to spare them the extra trip, let them do it the Monday and Thursday before. The villagers as well. They say, listen, we're doing it early because we're not here all the time. We're only coming in on the market day. The people don't live here, of course, should be in the proper day. So everyone acknowledges that what the other group is doing is correct for them, and what we're doing is correct for us. Therefore, there's no problem with Leisus going to do at all. It's a very elegant pshat. But the Ritva just asks, but if so, the Gemara's kasha doesn't start out. Because when it comes to the village, the open cities and the walled cities, it's the same thing. There's no potential for machlokas. The walled cities understand that the open cities should read in Yudalad. The open cities understand the walled cities should read in Tezvav. So what was the question of the Gemara in the first place? The fact that the Gemara asks the question seems that this beautiful svara that Tosfos says is not true. So the Ritva doesn't answer the question, but in defense of Tosfos, I would say the following interpretation. That really is the discussion of the Gemara. What is the idea which underlies Leisus Gaidu? What is the issue? One might have thought that the issur of factionalism is because there is one Torah. And the Torah is meant to be observed a single way. It's not meant to be split into different Torahs. The ideal is there should be one Torah. Torah achas Elochem. There should be one Torah for all of Klal Yisrael. And that's why you avoid factionalism. The alternative is to say that really there's no problem with people observing Torah in different ways. The main thing is there shouldn't be a machlokes. There shouldn't be fighting. There shouldn't be conflict. There shouldn't be tension. But the fact that there are different people observing Torah in different ways isn't an issue. Now, if the issue of Leisus Gaidu is that the Ratzon Hashem is that there be a standard observance of Torah, then the Ritva's svara that he brings from Tosfos isn't a svara at all. What difference does it make whether I think what you're doing is right and you think what I'm doing is right? But if there's supposed to be just one Torah, there's just one Torah. That's what Abaye and Rav are coming to Machadash. Abaye and Rav are coming to say that no, don't say that the idea that under the Leisus Gaidu is that Hashem wants there should be one Torah. Hashem wants to avoid conflict. So the question is that what conditions are necessary to avoid conflict? So Abaye says if it's two cities, there's no problem. If it's one city, there's a potential for conflict. Comes Rav and says no, that even in one city, if it's two batei dinim, if it's two separate authorities, there's no conflict. There's only conflict if it's a dispute within one bezdin. But this is the chiddush of Abaye and Rava. So therefore, before the Gemara brings Abaye and Rava, the Gemara thought Leisus Gaidu is because the Ratzon Hashem is there should be one Torah. So the question from Purim was very legitimate. So why do we have different days for the open cities and different days for the walled cities? But once Abaye and Rava are machadesh, that the idea behind Leisus Gaidu is we want to avoid machlokas, then we understand that when it comes to Purim, the whole kasha doesn't start out, and even within one city there's no problem with Leisus Gaidu because each group acknowledges that what the other one is doing is correct. That's the halachic aspect of it. The Meshech Chochmah says a very beautiful thing. He says that what is the name of the Megillah? You know, we call it Megillah Esther. But what is the name that the Megillah gives to itself? In the places in Megillah Esther, when the Megillah refers to the Megillah, what does it call itself? So there really are two names in the Megillah. One of them is Igeras HaPurim Hazois, this Purim letter. That's the title that the Megillah gives to itself. But in another place in the Megillah, it says when Mordechai and Esther sent it to all the provinces, it was called Divrei Shalom Ve'emes. Words of Shalom, words of peace, and words of truth. Very odd name. Why should the Megillah be called Divrei Shalom Ve'emes? So the Meshech Chochmah says that it alludes to this svara that the Ritva brings from Tosfos. That the Megillah is Divrei Shalom, it's words of peace. It's words of peace. Why is it words of peace? Because it's words of emes. Because since in this conflict between the open cities, the walled cities, the villages, the cities, everyone agrees that what the other side is doing is emes. No one is saying you're doing something wrong. Everyone is saying that what you're doing for you is correct. What I'm doing for me is correct. Therefore, since it's emes, therefore it's shalom, therefore it's peace. And there's no problem with Leisus Gaidu. So the Megillah calls itself Divrei Shalom Ve'emes Because even though it's prescribing different practices for different people, since each group acknowledges that what the other group is doing is emes, therefore it's also divrei shalom, it's words of peace. That's the beautiful pshat that the Meshech Chochmah says in the idea of shalom v'emes. The question is that is this just a peripheral issue, or is this something which gets to the very heart of what Purim is all about? And the Gemara says that when Haman came to Achashverosh to get permission to annihilate the Jewish people, the Gemara says, "Leka deyada lishtauye lishna bishakahan." There was no person that knew how to slander as well as Haman. In other words, Haman was able to raise all the dirt about the Jewish people, and he was able to remove all of Achashverosh's objections. No one could slander like Haman could slander. But the Sfarim HaKadoshim tell us that the points that Haman raised were not only points that he raised to Achashverosh. He was also mekatrei klape shemayim. He was raising valid criticisms of Klal Yisrael itself. It was a kitrug. And the idea of kitrug, I think we've explained in the past, is that sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu will acquiesce to human judgments. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though he has his own cheshbonos, but if people perceive that something is an injustice, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will act, because it should not be thought that the world is hefker and things are going on which are unjust, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should intervene and doesn't. So therefore, sometimes a person has the power to mekatrei. If a person makes a judgment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will accept that judgment. It's a very, very, very dangerous thing. That's why in Sefer Chasidus it says that one of the reasons that a person should be dan l'kaf schutz, the reason you should judge favorably, isn't just because it's a nice thing to give the benefit of the doubt, but because if you judge a person unfavorably, you can actually bring dinim, bring judgments on that person, because it's a kitrug. So you're passing judgment on that person. Where that person may really be innocent, you've decided he's guilty, and now HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have to acquiesce to your judgment that it shouldn't appear to you as if the world is hefker and God is not minding the store. Very, very frightening idea. And Haman was the master of kitrug. He was the master of being able to arouse arguments against Klal Yisrael. Interestingly, the arguments that Haman raises are not the arguments which Chazal mentioned. Chazal tell us that the chatoim, the sins for which the Jews were deserving of destruction, they bowed down to the statue, and they had Milchem Netzar, they had pleasure from the suit of Achashverosh. Haman raises other points. Haman says, Yeshnai am echad mefuzar u'mefared bein la'amim. There is a nation which is scattered, they are spread. Now the Gemara says that the point that Haman was making to Achashverosh was that if you annihilate the Jews, you won't be creating a bald spot on your kingdom. It's not like there's a province which is entirely Jewish, and you annihilate them, now there's a barren province. They're spread, there are a few here, there are a few there, a few there. So you remove them, no one will notice.